got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Ministry of Truth. I am your host, obviously. I'm Javi. Hello, Southwest Jeff. I am Javi and got a couple things to go over today. Obviously, you guys know, I'm an idiot. I'd like to start off with a little bit of humor. So what better humor than let's make more fun of politicians while addressing, something that's actually happened in the United States and may or may not have come out of the president's mouth. But let's get to the video, and then we'll talk more about what we're doing today. Oopsie. The United Spot.
Oh, man, what a great vacation.
Mr. President!
Hey, man, can't you see I'm on vacation? Show some respect.
Mr. President, what are you going to do about Hawaii?
Well, I'm going to send $200 million to Ukraine. That should fix it.
Mr. President, how will sending money to Ukraine help Hawaii?
Because sending money to Ukraine helps everything.
Hey, Joe!
Hey, buddy. I was just writing you another check. Is everything okay?
No, it's not, Joe.
Well, what's wrong? Have you been getting the money I sent you?
Yes, I've been getting the money, but I need more.
But I just sent you $200 million.
Yeah. I know, but one of the bathrooms downstairs has a clogged toilet.
Oh, no! A clogged toilet? Oh, I hate clogged toilets.
Me too, Joe. And it's going to cost at least $1 billion to unclog it.
Hey, man, whatever it takes, I'm here to help.
Thanks, Joe. I knew I could count on you.
Excuse me, Mr. President?
Hey, what did I tell you about bothering me when I'm writing checks to Ukraine?
Oops, sorry about that.
Well, what do you want?
The governor of Maui is here to ask for help.
Maui?
Well, here we go.
Is that in Ukraine?
No, it's in America.
All right, well, send him in, but I can only see him for a second. I mean, I'm busy doing important stuff, and I'm going on vacation again.
Hello, Mr. President.
Who are you? What do you want?
Mr. President, I'm the governor of Hawaii, and we need help.
All right, Hawaii? Is Hawaii in Ukraine?
No.
All right, well, hurry up and spit it out. I'm
Should have said yes.
busy.
Mr. President, I want to show you a video of the destruction of Maui.
Look, man, I'm busy writing checks to Ukraine. I really don't have time for this, all right?
Mr. President, it'll only take a
All
second.
right. Hurry up.
Mr. President, prepare yourself. This is hard to watch.
Oh, wow. This place looks awesome.
Mr. President, everything's destroyed. People's lives are ruined.
Man, that's malarkey. You want to see a country that's destroyed? I'll show you a country that's been destroyed. Now prepare yourself
United States.
for this. See this right here? This is what destroyed looks like. Look how miserable these people are. They have nothing. Their lives are ruined. Everything is gone.
It's only a
Get
club.
out of here. I got to write Ukraine another check. You know, a lot of people tell me that I give too much money to Ukraine. But every time I give money to Ukraine, something magical happens. Hunter stays out of prison. The Biden name stays out of the news. And me, Obama, Hillary, and Nancy get off scot-free.
Well, what happens when America has no more money to give Ukraine?
Oh, that's easy. Donald Trump,
Yeah?
you're
Fucking
being
Donald.
indicted.
For what? It's all your fault, Trump. That's what.
Lock him up.
Gotta love them. Oh. All right. So, as we all know, there's a lot of grooming going on in schools, grooming on media, grooming in social media. But what happens when the LGBT was like, wait a second, we're going to stand up against these fuckers. They're not part of us. But, if they did say that, they would get canceled. So, while at the same time, you have individuals like this guy, doesn't say his name. He's from the group Gays Against Groomers. Pretty good organization. Look him up on Instagram and look him up on Twitter. X, and they put out some good quality information. Granted, they do make fun of the LGBT, but they're gay. They call out groomers and they call out pedophiles all the time. I haven't mentioned that other stuff yet. Tommy boy, give me a break. It'll probably come though. It'll probably come.
I'm tired of this flag. My name is Chris Barrett, and I'm with the organization Gays Against Groomers. I am co-director of our chapters across the United States, and I'm also the Missouri chapter leader. I'm here to represent the concerns of my organization as it pertains to what is going on in Missouri, but I'm also here to give a voice to the gay and lesbian people you probably won't hear from tonight. And most importantly, I'm here to speak about protecting the innocence of children. This past June, Pride events across the nation invited children to take part in these festivals. In other parts of the country, we saw naked men pedaling bicycles in front of children during a parade and topless women dancing in fountains with kids.
Hey, Tommy boy, do they still do that where you guys are? I know it's pretty liberal.
Thankfully, what happened in Rolla wasn't nearly that bad. The thing that seemed to upset this community the most was the drag performance done in front of kids, and I and many other silent gays and lesbians opposed that sort of thing as well. I don't think anyone here is seriously considering banning drag shows altogether, despite what the opposition may say. What people like me and Gays Against Groomers want to make sure...
I think he's going to say the same thing I said. I'm not against drag shows. Personally, I would not attend them. But at the same time, I don't think it's a good idea for kids to attend them, so wait till they're at least 18. Then they can make the decision. The government says once they turn 18, they're considered an adult, which means they can make their own decisions. They can go to drag shows. Just don't, subject the kids to that. Can't take the kids to an NC-17 movie, can you?
Is the kids are not exposed to those performances. That's it. That's all we want. And I'm certain that this is all that many people in Rolla are asking for as well. Please do not listen to the ridiculous assertions that gay youth in Rolla are going to suddenly go out and commit suicide because they didn't have access to drag shows.
And where do you hear that from? You don't hear that from the conservative right. You don't hear that from the middle. You kind of start hearing it the further and further you go left until you hit the extremists. And then it's over from there.
Gay people across this country grew up without attending a drag show when they were young and turned out just fine. I happen to be one of those people. Please ignore that these shows can somehow be sanitized for kids. I have personally seen time and time again that these performers that are hell-bent on performing for kids do not keep up to their promise to keep things clean for children. I'll remind you of what one performer here in Rolla said to the audience when he was...
It's funny because I don't know if he's pointing at the drag or where that drag person was sitting, but that's pretty ballsy to point out a drag for being a groomer. Well, unless that's a pretty conservative area, but I don't know about that.
Asked about kids who were without parents. He said to them, and I'll quote, "I'll be your support. I'll be your drunken auntie that will let you drink wine coolers and smoke cigarettes in the basement. Under no circumstance is this invitation..."
It's funny because it was a drag queen. Did you know, a lot of you might know, a lot of you might not, depending on what community you fall in. There's a guy named Jeffrey Marsh. Jeffrey Marsh calls himself binary. He hangs out with Mrs. Mulvaney. YouTube. But he basically had a paywall Patreon telling kids, hey, let your parents subscribe, ask your parents for the money, but it's just between you and me, and we're gonna talk. Like you can talk to me. I'm a mentor. You know everything that goes in the Chomo handbook. So it gets even better, right?
What I would call grooming is appropriate. Pride festivals and drag shows have been for decades adults-only events. The gay and lesbian community of just 10 years ago would have never thought of involving children in something that was so clearly just for adults. Pride was a political movement in which gay people sought equal rights. drag was about gay men paying a glamorous homage to women through an artistic performance. I see nothing wrong with these things, but I also don't see why kids need to be involved.
Thank you.
So why are kids being targeted now for when decades the gay and lesbian community rightfully...
Here's my opinion. Some of you have already heard this. The reason they're targeting kids, the kids are the future of the planet, right? So if you figure out, fuck, there's people that are waking up and they're like, oh my God, there's no way we can run a country that, where people govern their own selves. We have to be in charge. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, let's erase history and say, slavery never existed. White people are the problem. And, so forth and so forth. So by the time they have kids, they believe it. Because they were brainwashed to believe it. So they brainwashed their kids. What happened to our generation, Gen X, and the first half of millennials? I don't fucking know. Somehow we can see through this bullshit. I would say maybe 45% of us.
Separated our politics and entertainment from kids. Well, I can assure you what is happening now has very little to do with gays and lesbians.
30 seconds, please.
You may have noticed over the years that the letters kept being added onto to our so-called LGBTQ community. Well, it's the TQ.
If some of y'all watch some of my older shit, you'll hear me say will never refer to them as the LGBT because they're not LGBT, they're LGB. And the reason behind saying I think I said it to a member LGB on one of my previous beginning episodes. And they say they don't disagree with trans, but it's the ones that try to sexualize your kids and then use it as a, LGB as the ruse or the main detractor. Nobody can say anything bad about it because then they'll be called a bigot. Just like now they're trying to add minor attracted minor attracted people. It's a normal vocabulary. So it's like, oh, it's a mental illness. Yeah. Oh, well, it's okay. It's okay. But it will never be okay. Because you have people like me. You have people like you that fucking can see through this bullshit. And we need to help others see through this bullshit. Because that's what it is. It's a cloud. They clouded everyone. Got even worse with social media. Oh, I'm going off a tangent. Let's finish the video.
QIA plus that has taken over. So I want to take a stand here in Rolla for all those gay and lesbian people who are tired of this nonsense. You see this flag?
Yeah. You're right.
It's got all this new nonsense on it. Remember the
Triangles?
original pride flag that was just
rainbow.
A rainbow? Well, now we've got this one that just keeps adding things to it.
Oh.
I'm tired of this.
You probably should have cut it better.
You know what
No worries.
flag that we need to get in touch with?
What's that?
Don't do it.
Fuck yes!
Right here.
All
That's the
one
flag
people.
we need to be in touch with.
I'm sorry.
So, anyway,
Thank you,
this is the
Chris.
flag that we should all be united behind, not the flag of perverts that want access to your kids. Thank
You
you.
heard him.
Chris, thank you, Chris.
And that's gays against groomers. Gays against groomers. Definitely something to check out. And they do have a lot of humor. But the whole reason I am here today, because I like to, every once in a while talk about presidential candidates. I've talked about Vivek Ramaswamy quite a few times. We do know how I feel about Donald Trump. You know how I feel about Joe Biden. But let's talk about the ones that haven't been president yet. And another guy that I feel for is RFK Jr. He's a Democrat, yes, but he's shunned by Democrats. He's shunned by media. He's shunned by social media. Why? Because he came out against vaccines. He's anti-vax. RFK is not anti-vax, guys. He got the vaccine. His kids got the vaccine. And he was like, you know what? It's everyone's choice. Don't fucking force people to take it because nobody knows anything about it. But he also did say he regrets taking it at the same time. Because, well, we know what's going on with it now. But a lot of people don't want to interview RFK because they think he's a crazy conspiracy theorist. But when you think about it, we all know, if you're listening to me, conspiracy theories come with some kind of truth. And that's why I like Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson could be the new face of Big Brother for all we know. And he's using, hey, we're letting free speech. People want to interview these guys, so we'll let them. So you never know, because both sides are working under the same umbrella. It's just who's in charge at that time. The other side needs to have Big Brother stand up and form their own Big Brother to take down old Big Brother. Does that make sense? Let me start this video, and I'll be back in a second.
The only interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. conducted in the last 15 years that doesn't mention vaccines. But if you're interested in why we have found ourselves at war with Russia, or who killed his uncle, President Kennedy, and why, it's worth watching. Bobby Kennedy Jr., thank you for joining us. So I noticed when you showed up, you've been on the road for weeks, you had no Secret Service with you, which is a little weird given that your father was murdered while running for president, as you now are. Why wouldn't you have Secret Service protection?
Well, I did do a tweet on that got 30 million views when we got rejected. We applied in May for Secret Service protection. Secret Service protection was only allocated to the nominees of the parties prior to 1968. But when my father was killed, they changed the law immediately, and all of the people who were running against him, including George Wallace, immediately got Secret Service protection. So the law says that you're entitled to Secret Service protection automatically 100 days out. But the president also has discretion to give Secret Service protection to any candidate for any reason. And there are criteria, which is that you have to have 15% of polling results for a limited period of time. But he even can overrule that. For example, President Obama was given Secret Service protection 441 days out, or 551 days out, even though he had only, I think, 5% support at that time. My uncle Teddy was given Secret Service protection 450 days out, even though he had not even declared for his presidency. So he and Carter hated each other. President Carter was, the president of his own party, and Teddy had been enormously critical of him. And personally, they had a very personal antipathy for one another. And Teddy ended up running against him. But when he was moving into that decision to run, Carter, in a very classy move, gave him Secret Service protection. Oh, we applied for it. I get a lot of threats, a lot of death threats, and I get, a lot of people who are, for example, about 2 weeks ago, a mentally ill person made it to the second story of my house, and that is a very, very common occurrence.
Inside your house?
Yeah, inside my house. Before, somebody who was working there stopped them and then called the police. And we gave the Secret Service a 67, in fact, Gavin DeBecker, who you've had on this show,
yes,
who's runs the premier security service in the world, put together a 67-page report, which included 28 pages of all the threats of, typical threats against me and other indicia that I should have Secret Service protection. And I assumed the president would give it to me because, it just seems like bad judgment not to give it to me. If you go even on my Twitter feed, probably one out of, I don't know, every 30 or 40 comments says, oh, you're going to get killed or something like that. It takes notice of the peculiar threats to my family, family members who are in this business. So it's something that, the average American.
Sorry about that. Had to do some adult.
Yeah, your name is Robert F. Kennedy.
Yeah. And so it was an odd decision. I got.
Granted, Robert F. Kennedy, he does have a medical condition which caused the way he talks. I'm really surprised that, these trolls, left, right, middle, have not made fun of the way he talks. Like, oh, this guy wouldn't make a great president. Look at the way he talks when he, Yeah, how would he talk to a leader of another country? He's respected. Okay, Joe Biden, John Fetterman, they're not respected. That's why people make fun of the way they talk. There's a difference, and you're seeing it.
A letter. Gavin actually got the letter because he had been doing. And by the way, I want to say this: the Secret Service themselves were wonderful. They were very, very encouraging, and they were very helpful at every step along the way. And I believe, and I can't speak for them, but I believe that their assumption was that we were going to get Secret Service protection. In fact, they told Gavin, we're going to send somebody out there within 10 days to interview Cheryl and Bobby and to tell them what it's going to look like. Because there's a lot of questions about, do I go to the gym? Do I have
I don't know if I missed it. Maybe he's going to get into it later. Joe Biden doesn't want to give this guy Secret Service protection. I think he says it, if I remember hearing it right. That's fucking crazy because every presidential candidate gets Secret Service protection, to include Barack Obama, who had it for 500 plus days before he was elected.
All of these questions that I don't know the answers to, and they come and they have a standard process for informing you. But then they went dark, and they said a decision is made very quickly within 14 days, is what they told us. And they said, we have 8 details standing by ready to go, so we can do this very quickly. And then they went dark. And for 88 days, we didn't hear from them. And then I got the letter from Mayorkas, Alexander Mayorkas, who's the director of DHS, saying that we've determined that you don't need Secret Service protection.
But it's very obvious, and you've confirmed it, that there are threats against your life, against your family. That's known. And so if they deny you protection and they know that, what message are they sending?
I don't really
they
know
want
what
they want him to disappear.
They're doing. And by the way, we've looked, and there's a guy called Jeremy Hammond who's done a really good article, a really thorough article about the past. And he was not able, and we were not able to find a single presidential candidate who had requested protection from the president and was not given protection. Herman Cain got it, I think, 500 days out. Jesse Jackson, Shirley Chisholm, George Bush, and Ronald Reagan.
I'm glad he said Bush and Reagan because he was listing off a list of black nominees. But then I'll let him continue.
Something 500 or 600 days out when they first ran.
Yeah, I think he was talking about Obama.
Got it. Something 500 or 600 days.
Oh, Reagan.
When they first ran. So it's just standard operating procedure. And particularly people who are polling around
I got the
anywhere over 15%, which I have been for 4 or 5 months now, are regarded as it's been treated as pro forma. And I am the outlier. I'm the single outliner that we could find that was denied Secret Service.
Why do you think that is?
I think I think the DNC is playing hardball. And let's say this, I think the least malevolent interpretation that you can put on it is that they know that I'm going to have some kind of security service. And that typically would cost me, to do real security service between $100,000 and $200,000 a month. Because you have to pay the protectors, you have to pay for their transportation,
of course,
you have
hotels,
to pay for the cars and the hotels, the foods, and all of this. And it's very expensive because I'm traveling every day.
So he's saying the Secret Service does this for every presidential candidate for, I guess, a year out. So when we have a field of like 12, $100,000 a pop a month per security detail. Not to mention the detail that the former presidents get when they get out of office. Lifetime detail. All the people in Congress. Bro, we waste billions of dollars for Secret Service, and it doesn't make sense. They're easily replaceable because you can easily take a senator and be like, yep, this dude's Well, at least we should be able to take a senator like this motherfucker's not doing what he's doing. Let's impeach him in the state and get somebody new. They won't do that. Why? Because it's profitable to stick with the piece of shit that's still in office. Because he's been doing it so long for 47 years, he's a fucking pro at it now.
I think they probably feel like they can bleed me white by, and making sure that I'm not spending that money on advertising or organization, but that I have to raise a lot of money for my own protection. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating about that.
Does it strike you that the Biden administration pays for personal security for Zelensky, but not for you?
No, well, listen, John Bolton still has a.
Zelensky has a personal detail paid for by the U.S. I can't make it make sense, guys. I'm sorry.
The Secret Service detail.
Still?
Yeah, still.
And why does John Bolton have it?
And he didn't do a good job in
all the president's
Yeah,
family have Secret Service details. Hunter has a Secret Service detail. When he goes to court every day, he has 4 or 5 cars that are coming with him in a very, very big detail. So, and many government officials who are ex-government officials, what the Secret Service told us, and you can go to look at Jeremy Hammond's report, which you can find on, I think you just go on the internet, put Jeremy Hammond and, RFK Secret Service. He shows that literally nobody, no presidential candidate, many, many other people are receiving it. But I'm really like an outlier.
So, that raises the larger, you're running against Biden, right? So obviously you're not on his Christmas card list anymore, but it does raise the bigger question. Why do people in Washington have this, and not just in government, but also in media, have this kind of special loathing for you, this hatred of you?
I don't know that. I cannot answer that question. I'm shocked, even though, I've been, I'd say maligned for many years because the stuff that I was doing with vaccines. The kind of the uniformity of the vitriol against me in the mainstream media and the dishonesty of it, that, virtually every article contains
there goes my channel.
not just mischaracterizations, but also just outright lies, things that any fact checker could look up and determine were not true. And they all are doing it, whether it's Vanity Fair or whether it's the Atlantic Monthly or Washington Post, Boston Globe. There's virtually no exception.
What do you think your crime is?
I think part of it is that there's been, and again, I don't know, I can't explain it. Somebody else, I know somebody will explain it in a way at one point where I'll go, that makes sense. But right now, what it seems to me is that there's been this alignment, this political alignment that I think really started with Fox News back, when Roger was running things there, where he overtly made it a political network. He aligned it with the Republican Party, and he said, we're going to push their agenda. And up until then, that has been considered a journalistic ethical breach. The networks were supposed to at least pretend.
The shitty thing is, like, when it comes to journalism, a lot of journalists go to the same schools. A lot of these same schools are funded by the same people. And if you go to these same schools that are funded by the same people, you're going to have the same mentality that the school told you to look for. And if you report the way they want instead of reporting the way it should be, you're A-OK, USA. But if you're not, they fire you, tell you can't work for any more news sources until your contract with them is up. But you found a loophole, and you just have a Twitter account, X account, hanging out, having fireside chats.
And the newspapers as well. But now I think that business model works so well for Fox, and again, that I think MSNBC and CNN adopted the same business model. And then there's been this big consolidation in the media where there really is no independent media. You have every newspaper in this country, every radio station, every TV station, almost all the billboards and most of the large internet content providers that are now owned by 5 companies. You know, that was the elite.
5 companies again. Those of you watched, I think it was my last show, we talked about 5 different companies that do the same exact thing, and the government buys from these same 5 companies, who, by the way, way overpriced stuff for the DoD. So why not do it the same with the media? You control the money in the military industrial complex. How do you push that and make more money? You make the media make the people your bitch. I'm stoned, but I make sense.
Illegal under the 1928 Communication of the Radio Act. Today, it's been that has been what's happened. We've had this big consolidation, and I think the profit models for Wall Street, which now is BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, which own them all, and they have
yesterday.
Oh, the news divisions have become business models, business profit centers. And they've aligned themselves. They've figured out that their strategy is to align themselves with the DNC or the RNC. That's the only thing that's the best explanation. And it's probably not a very good one, but
and you're in the way of
this
the
weird
DNC.
Uniformity.
Oh, but its effect is to ignore stories that are objectively the most important stories. I mean, wherever you fall on those questions, there's no denying that the war in Ukraine is changing the world. It will change history. Most of the stuff is a footnote. That's a book.
It's a fucking
and
joke.
Yet the coverage of it is not even.
Yeah.
So, for example, the
and
president.
That's much more consequential.
Well, it's the most consequential, but it's
the coverage of me, which is there's no questioning of these orthodoxies. And when it comes to the Ukraine war, I mean, we're being lied to about it.
In what way?
Well, I mean, we were lied to from the beginning. We had this comic book
fiction. This is on YouTube.
Which we see on every war. There's a bad guy who's unspeakably evil.
Yes.
Who's planning world conquest.
And the thing is, all this good guy, bad guy shit, we're told we're the good guys. Nobody invades us. We always invade them because we're the good guys. We're the good guys. We would never do anything that would, go against principles and mentality of, humanity, making everything better for the people. No. What's up, Tacoma Joe?
Or a terrorist attack on, on America. And we have to be the good guys and go in and stop it. And, the background of the Ukraine war is much more complex than that. The U.S. has been involved, in particularly the neocons in the White.
So before he explains this, because I've been saying this quite a few times. So Gorbachev and the EU and America decided that wherever they stopped right there at the time where the UN line is between Russia and Europe, they were like, if you guys agree not to expand any more east of here, we're good. We have no issues. And I believe it was called the Istanbul Papers, Istanbul Memo. If it's not, it's the it's not the Panama Papers. It's the Istanbul. Just give it a good read. And they're basically, by trying to make Ukraine NATO, is an act of war by Europe and us, which is why we're bulking up Ukraine, because we can't fight the war. They can, which doesn't exist. Ever seen footage of war going on like you did when I was in Afghanistan and Iraq? I'm going back to the video because,
White House, I wouldn't say particularly. I'd say a group of people that are known as neocons since 2001 have been talking about putting NATO in Ukraine. Now, and I'll give you the background. In 1992, the walls came down and the Soviet Union collapsed. Gorbachev went to Tony Blair and to President Bush, who were the UK and US presidents at that time, and said, I'm going to do something extraordinary that basically is going to have the rest of Russian history branding me as a traitor to my country. I'm going to withdraw 400,000 Soviet troops from East Germany, and I'm going to allow you to reunify Germany under NATO troops. So you're going to move NATO troops, a hostile force, into our barracks and our bases. I'm going to do that. And the only commitment I want from you is that once I allow Germany to reunify, to become part of NATO, that you will never move NATO further to the east, because we're going to now release all of these Soviet states that were part of the Soviet Union. They're going to become independent states, and we don't want NATO moving into those. And James Baker, who was the Secretary of State at that time, famously
If you
said,
think about it, just look at that states like Bosnia, Herzegovina are now their own two different states, countries. And the other one was Czechoslovakia. You got the Czech Republic and it's Slovakia in.
promise that we will not move NATO 1 inch to the east. So Gorbachev now did that, and he's now, despised in Russia. And then in 1996 and 1997, so 5 years later, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the first kind of the father of the neocon movement, what the neocons represent in a sentence is that they were a group of people who believed,
You're right, Tommy
and, Donald Rumsfeld and Jonathan Yu.
I don't think Macedonia was before that.
Robert Kagan, Victoria Nuland, who's now at the top
His wife,
State Department official. Their belief was that the U.S. had won the Cold War, and that victory gave us the privilege of dominating the world using our superior military unipower status and our superior military status for the next century. So their principal blueprint document is called Project for a New American Century. In other words, America
You are correct,
would
Tommy
own
Boy,
the
Macedonia.
21st century. So Brzezinski says, okay, we should start this process by moving NATO into all the former satellite states. Well, and this was 1997. At that time, George Kennan was still around. Now, George Kennan, as you know, was the principal architect of the Cold War containment policy. He's arguably the most important, most respected diplomat and statesman in American history. Oh, he said, if you do that, you are going to provoke a violent response from Russia. They cannot live with NATO on their borders. They cannot, any more than we would live with a Soviet alliance in Mexico and Canada. At that time, Bill Perry was Clinton's Secretary of State, and Bill Perry said, if you do this, you go forward with this plan, I'm going to resign because it's so foolhardy. You are forcing Russia into a violent military response. And the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union.
So this goes back to Clinton, possibly further back. So it's not a new thing. It's just oh, this one's great now. We can actually use this. We've been saving this in our back pocket. Great. Biolabs, sex trafficking, human trafficking. What else? What else is in Ukraine? Nazis. Don't forget their secret police was Nazis. And guess who helped train those guys? The CIA. I'm done.
At that time, who is now the head of the CIA, said the same thing. It's the worst mistake America can make to move NATO to the east. So we went ahead and did it. We moved it not 1 inch, but 1,000 miles, 14 countries. And then we put nuclear-ready missile launchers, Aegis missile systems, which are made by Lockheed and can take Tomahawk missiles.
Lockheed.
12
that
minutes
name.
from Moscow. We could, in 12 minutes, decapitate the entire leadership of Russia. And we put those in Poland and Romania. And we then tried to move it into NATO into Ukraine. So you remember when my uncle, when Russia put missile systems, nuclear missile systems in Cuba, and my uncle would have had to invade. He was able, the reason Russia put them there then is because we had put nukes, Jupiter missiles, in Turkey and Italy. My uncle and father made a secret deal with Ambassador Dobrynin.
No, not Italy, Turkey and India.
Where they said to him, look, we understand you're angry. You cannot live with Jupiter missiles in Turkey. That's why you put your missiles in Cuba. If you remove your missiles from Cuba within 6 months, we will remove ours from Turkey. But nobody says what the deal was. And that's what happened. So now we're back, and we've again put, nuclear-ready missile systems along right next to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And now we want to go do the one thing that Russia has said, and Putin said again and again and again, this is a red line. Before Putin, the Russian leadership was saying it is a red line. You cannot go into Ukraine. The Russians have been invaded 3 times from you. Our country's never been invaded. The Russians were invaded 3 times through Ukraine. The last time they were invaded, Hitler killed between 20 and 40 million Russians. Hitler killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. In my
That's why it was a Nazi state for a while. They went to go back and forth.
Speech in American University in 1963, in July of 1963, he said to the American people, he said, we are all taught we won World War II, but we didn't win World War II. The Russians won it. And the sacrifice they made to destroy Hitler was beyond anything Americans can imagine. He was trying to tell the American people, you have to put ourselves in their position, and understand what they're doing. And he said, a third of the country was leveled. Every city, the forests burned, the cities were leveled, the forests and fields burned. Imagine if that happened from the coast, the east coast of the United States, to every city, forest, and field from here to Chicago. That's what the Russians put up with. So we have to understand this, that Ukraine is a red line. The invasion came through Ukraine, and they can't live with it. It's a security issue for them that is almost beyond our comprehension. And so, we've had.
So that suggests the point is war with Russia.
The point was war with Russia. And in fact,
always has been.
The neocon said that again and again, and Biden, when he was and let me get back to that, okay? Because that is absolutely true. The Biden, was first of all, in 2014, to go through the modern history, 2014, there are riots it's called the Maidan Rebellion in Ukraine, which we're not told that we are financing those riots. The newspapers never told us, our government never told us. USAID, which is the CIA.
So a lot of what he's saying about Ukraine, there's a documentary by Oliver Stone. I think it's called Ukraine Under Fire. It gives you a different perspective on Ukraine, that from the Russian perspective, and pretty decent talking to Russian generals and Vladimir Putin. It's a crazy documentary, and there's a reason they can't play it on YouTube. I think you have to find it on Rumble.
A front.
It's a good documentary,
$5 billion into funding those riots. Those riots lead to to a coup d'etat against the first democratically elected government of the Ukraine. It was a government that refused to choose sides and to say, we're going to be on the side of the West. So we wanted them out. A month before that government is overthrown, Victoria Nuland, who's the part of the centerpiece of the neocon ideology, and who is now a high-level official in the State Department, has a secret call with the U.S. ambassador, which is tape recorded and is now public, which anybody can go and look up, where she is picking the new cabinet for the Ukraine.
Yep.
For Ukraine, which is
Kind of the same
you know,
way
which
as we
is
installed
US Western
Zelensky.
cabinet. So they're picking the new government a month before the old government is overthrown.
Is that how democracy? Is that democracy when Victoria Nuland picks her government?
Yes.
Well, that's the point. Is USAID doesn't really do, and the CIA don't do democracy. The CIA has overthrown, I think, 83 governments between 1947 and 1997. That's a third of the governments on Earth, and most of them were democracies. Oh, it doesn't.
Why would we do that?
It doesn't do democracy. It does good. It does. So then, to put the rest of this history, and we put in a Western government. Everybody says, well, the Russians started this by invading Crimea. But put yourself in Putin's position. And I'm not
People in Crimea want to be part of
Russia.
Russia.
He went into Ukraine. It was
He even
illegal.
voted
My
for
son
it.
went over there and fought against it, and risked his life in the Kharkiv rebellion. I'm not making excuses for him. What he did was brutal. It was illegal and it was unnecessary. But we have to understand our role in the provocations. And so if you're in Putin's position, now you're looking at Ukraine, and Ukraine is being run by a pro-US government. What's the first thing he thinks? They're going to take Vladivostok, which is the port in Crimea on the Black Sea, which has been a Russian port, their only warm water port for 347 years. It's where the Russian Navy is, their sub base, it's everything else. And he says, now this new government is going to invite the U.S. Navy in to take over our facilities. We got to go in there and take it back. So he goes into Crimea. He goes in and takes Crimea without firing a shot or killing a single person. The Crimean population is largely Russian, and they welcome the invasion. So, again, I'm not making excuses for him, but I'm saying we have to understand. My uncle always said we have to understand the position of our adversaries, and what forces are they dealing with. So then then the Russians now there's as soon as we put in that new government, the first rule they pass is to make the Russian language essentially illegal in Donbass and Lugansk, where 90% of the population are Russian. And there's then peaceful uprising, which people.
Funny story. When I talk to a lot of foreigners, when they grew up outside of the United States and went to school, a lot of times the schools had English as a required language, K through 12. Why? So are we colonizing them by making them learn our language? Maybe, maybe not. Or is it because business deals, but I don't know. It's just weird that it's probably the most well-known language around the entire world, except for maybe in Africa. But you never know.
People begin dying, they turn violent. Now, which side made them violent is a dispute. But it's not a dispute that the Russians were now being treated. The ethnic Russian population in Ukraine is now being treated like redheaded stepchildren. They're not, they're being slapped around, and they're being abused, and they're not being allowed to practice their culture or their language.
Or leave the country.
And so there's a vote then in Donbass, Lugansk, where they vote 90-10 to join Russia. Russia says no.
There it is.
Says no, I don't want you, but let's sign an agreement that protects you. So they put together an agreement with France, Germany, and Russia called the Minsk Accords. The Minsk Accords say leave Donbass and Lugansk as part of Ukraine, but make them semi-autonomous so they can speak their own language. And so the Russians who live there are going to be protected from violence by the government. And the Russian parliament or the Ukrainian parliament won't ratify the Minsk Accords, but France agreed to it, Germany agreed to it, and Putin agreed to it. So then Zelensky runs in 2019. Zelensky is a comedian and he's an actor. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way because my wife is a comedian and actor, but I'm saying it because here's a guy with no political background who wins the election with 90% of the vote. Why did he win the election? He won the election because he ran on a peace platform. He ran promising that he would sign the Minsk Accords. He gets into office. The minute he gets there and he's told everybody, I'm going to sign the Minsk Accords and settle the peace with Russia, he suddenly pivots. And the
Zelensky winning 90% of the votes was because of, well, the United States CIA were like, no, we can't have this guy. We need to get rid of him. We need to get somebody that would be more likable, someone that we can use that can control the entire country. Why not get the actor that plays the president? People know him. People are like, well, yeah, I mean, he seems legit. You got the U.S. here. He's got the U.S. giving us trillions and trillions of dollars that they give to their own people because, well, freedom rings.
We don't know what happened, but the rational assumption is that the U.S. government told him he could not do that. So that Victoria Nuland and Anthony Blinken and Avril Haines, who's the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, told him you cannot have a peace with Russia. Plus, people within, ultranationalists within Ukraine told him, if you sign that, we're going to kill you. And a lot of people say, anyway, they threatened him with death, and that is pretty well documented. Then Russia invades. But Russia only invades. And so we say, oh, look, Putin is trying to take over Europe. But they only send in 40,000 troops. I think there's 3.5 million people in Kiev. So they clearly did not want to take the country. He clearly wanted to bring people to the negotiating table. He did not send in enough troops to take all of Ukraine. So
40,000 really is not that much.
So then, and Zelensky comes to the negotiating tables, and we now know this, and this is recent information. In March of 2022, Zelensky and Putin agree on a peace agreement that's based upon the Minsk Accords. It's like Minsk Accords 2.0. And Zelensky initials it, the Russians initial it, and Russia begins withdrawing its troops from Ukraine.
I remember this.
And what happens? President Biden sends Boris Johnson over there to torpedo the agreement and make Zelensky tear
Also
it up.
remember this.
And then we go to war. 350,000 Ukrainian kids are now dead. And 40 or 50,000 Russians. So and that month, April is when they signed it in March. April, Boris Johnson was sent over there to torpedo it. And that month, Lloyd Austin, who is the Secretary of Defense under Biden, is asked, why are we at war with
2003, 2004, I served under General Austin when he was a 2-star. Thought the dude was fucking awesome. Great leader, blah, 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 blah. And then I saw his political views. And yeah, let's just say him being the Secretary of Defense, I know he's a shitbag now. But go Army.
Or in Ukraine. And he said, our purpose in this war is to exhaust the Russian army and degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. But that is not what they're telling us.
But do they?
And Biden that month says, when he's asked about the war in Ukraine, he says, our purpose is regime change in Russia. So again, that has nothing to do with Ukraine. What that means, the Ukraine is a proxy in essentially a struggle between two superpowers, between Russia and the United States.
Jesus.
And, we've now committed $113 billion over there. And just to put that in perspective, the total budget of EPA is $12 billion. The total budget of the CDC is $12 billion. We're sending $113 billion over. When Mitch McConnell
Fuck that dude.
was asked, how can we do this? When our country, when you're cutting food stamps and cutting Medicare, cutting food stamps to 30 million Americans, cutting Medicare to 15 million Americans, they're not going to have any health insurance. how can we spend 113 billion over there? If we had that 113 billion here, we wouldn't have had to cut one food stamp payment. And he said, well, don't worry, the money's not staying in Ukraine. It's all coming back to military contractors in the United States. Well, so that's interesting.
Wait.
Because then you look at,
Wait.
who owns those.
Wait a second. You mean to tell me it's like we give them money and then they give us money for our equipment. We give them money, so they give us the money for our equipment. We give them money. You get clean money. Clean money? Fuck us, right?
Those military contractors, and you see who gets on CNN to pump up the Ukraine war. It's a bunch of former generals and colonels and Pentagon people. But if you go in, and CNN never, and MSNBC never do this, but if you go look at those guys, they're all people who are working for Raytheon and General Dynamics and Boeing and Lockheed. So they're generals, but they're not identified that, they're actually working for the military contractors who are cashing in on the war. And then, those military contractors in turn are owned by three companies. All of them are owned by three companies, by BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And
as we went over yesterday.
And, the inflation that from printing the money to fund the war and to fund the 16 trillion we spent to fund the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns, 8 trillion we've spent on.
It's funny thing about American money. If you look at some of the older American money, paper and coins, give me a second. Okay. Some of the older coins in the United States and some of the other paper money. If you look, maybe that's not going to work. Oh, you can't see it. It says right here, 1 ounce fine silver, $1. This is backed by silver because it's silver. If you look at paper money, I can't remember it's the top or the bottom, you'll see it says certificate note, I believe is what it says. Promissory note. It says promissory note. I have a couple paper money that actually says 1 silver note. So they owe me silver. So they owe me silver as opposed to saying, oh, hey, you're just borrowing this, okay? So and that's probably why you see all the commercials about gold and silver. Detective Gomez, this is not product placement because I don't, but it's the truth. That's why we got off the gold and silver standard, so we could just start printing more and more money, as you've seen what we've done. So you're right there, Redbeard. I just couldn't remember what it said on top. But anyway, back to Mr. RFK. Back to RFK.
And on these wars since 2020, all of them losing wars, all of them have made our country less safe. Look at what this war is doing. We have pushed Russia into the embrace of China, which is the worst foreign policy outcome imaginable. It is not good for the national security of our country. And we're now have Putin's back to the wall. Well, Putin is the world's leading nuclear superpower. We aren't. He's got 1,000 more nukes than we do, and their nukes are much better than ours. They can shoot down.
Wait. We've been lied to, guys. We are told we have the largest amount of nukes in the world. And that's why, but we don't use them. Because we agreed, we signed a pact with all these other countries to include India, Russia, and China. I don't know if China or Iran are really in it. That we won't use these weapons. But why do we have them if we agreed not to use them? And why do we have specific points along the Russia-Ukraine area So if they do launch a nuke, they can take that thing out before it even gets out of the airspace. But they're going to tell you they have nukes that can reach the United States. That bitch will not ever hit the United States because we have all these precautions in place that they don't tell you about. That's literally why we have the Army. It's literally why we have the Air Force. You just think it's like, oh, we're being all we can be. We're going to America and our other countries take over. Nobody's going to come here. Nobody's going to attack here. You attack here, and guess what? We take out half of Afghanistan and Iraq and make them our bitches, but then we pay them to make their country better. Democracy.
On our nukes, we can't shoot down theirs. Oh, we are going up against it. We are provoking a confrontation that could very easily lead to nuclear war. And I've talked to.
Wait, can I ask you to pause here for a second?
Yeah.
Everything you've said is checkable and rational, and you're extrapolating out to the future, which is easy to envision. Like, I don't understand how our policymakers aren't reaching the same conclusions you just reached. Like, they think that war with Russia is a war we're going to win.
We cannot win this war.
Well, of course. So what are they doing? I don't understand. It would be
like Mexico beating us in a war. They're not going to let the Ukraine. They cannot lose this war. And anybody who thinks Russia is not up to the war, go look at the Netflix documentary on Stalingrad and look at the sacrifice that Russians are willing to make.
I in no way endorse Netflix. Detective Gomez. Okay. I realize I'm not part of that too. Just in case. But hold on.
Putin today and up to the war. Go look at the Netflix documentary on Stalin.
But I do not support Netflix any way since they came out with Cuties. I instantly cut any ties with Netflix. And it's weird because the not progressive, you can't say progressive and right in the same sentence. The right was like, we're going to boycott Netflix. Shit lasted 2 weeks. I've lasted forever.
Stalingrad and look at the sacrifice that Russians are willing to make. Putin today, we thought this was going to hurt him. He's more popular than he's ever been. All the U.S. polling firms show him polling at 90% popularity. And
in Russia.
In Russia, among the Russians are supporting him. And he also, we were going to break him with the sanctions. We did the opposite. We made him more powerful.
Yeah.
He's now insulated.
Funny story. We're not going to support Russian oil. We're not going to let Russian oil be brought, into the mainstream supply routes. And we're not going to take, I think it's rubles. Fuck rubles. We're not taking it. And we're going to make sure the UN, EU, they don't take rubles either. So they have to, comes out switch the money, but we won't convert it for them. Oh, that's what the media said. However, Russia was making tons of money pipelining oil to Germany. We can't have that. Terrorists blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And now, Europe has to get thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of oil from, guess what, the United States. And because the way it was working, with the oil being so expensive, easily each oil liner was making $400 to $800 million profit off one boatload. People were getting rich.
From the trade and the international banking system, he's now got this great trade agreement with China. He's now, engineering the creation of BRICS, which has 40 leading nations around the world turning against the U.S. currency as a reserve currency. and adopting his petrocurrency or the Chinese currency. That is the worst threat to the United States. That if we lose that status as the world's reserve currency, the Great Depression will look like a cakewalk.
So I agree with all of that, and all of it. I mean, your
That's
position.
the reason
to
I'm
my
saying
ears
it's a good idea to, just in case, not a product placement, because I need to start listening to myself. I need to start getting more silver and gold because it's making sense now. Our currency is going to mean nothing. So that dollar bill you got that says promissory or whatever, as long as it doesn't say silver certificate or gold certificate, it's useless. Might as well roll it up and smoke it. But the world will definitely trade on gold and silver. Fuck, now I know why we see all these commercials. Let me talk to them. I want a sponsorship.
sounds moderate and obvious. I just don't understand how the Secretary of State, how the president, how his competent advisors can't have reached the same conclusions. Like, what are they thinking?
Well, unfortunately, I think, and I share your sense of mystery about that. But I don't,
because what you're saying is not crazy. It's not like some far out theory.
I mean, the only way I can explain it, and I'm not, I don't like to look into other people's heads and tell why they're doing one thing or another. But President Biden has always been a very pro-war president. And, he was the one senator that stood out supporting
47 years.
War, my uncle and Obama and many, and Hillary also. But Biden has always been a reliable, gung-ho, let's go to war guy. And so I don't think, to the extent that he's thought this all through.
So about Biden being pro-war, I'm not gonna lie. When I was a younger soldier in the Army, maybe when I was a kid, I was definitely pro-war because, you know what? Like I said, America good, every country other bad that wants to invade people. Parents went to the Gulf War. I grew up thinking Saddam Hussein bad, Iraq bad. Okay, so they were going to invade Kuwait. Gotcha, that makes sense. But then you learn a history, and we learned that we helped Kuwait or Iraq before. We helped them with Iran, gave them money, gave them equipment. And then we were like, hey, please attack us. Please attack us. Attack us with our weapons. And we have a good history of that. And I don't remember where I was going with this. So it'll come back to me.
I think it follows, it's consistent with his historical instincts. And then he's surrounded by people who are, these are the same people who got us in the Iraq War.
Yep.
I know.
Look at what happened. Let me go through what happened in Iraq just for.
But I'm no longer pro-war. After being there, seeing what was happening, seeing invasion, I forgot what it's called, and then rebuilding. I saw the way the process went. I'm like, fuck, man, we're really wasting money here, and it's all in the under the big facade of the global war on terrorism. There is a $1 billion facility that was built in Afghanistan for the U.S. military. Top of the line, $1 billion. Everything was fucking like, oh my God. If I wanted to take over the fucking world, this would be my headquarters. They never used it. They never used it. They never occupied it. They built it and were like, oh, you know what? This is a bad location. And just left it there. It was done and everything. We just left it there. Interesting. That's why when I see what we've done, we didn't rebuild Germany. We didn't rebuild Japan. We were like, ha 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 ha, we fucked you up. Go get better. Not over there. Not the global war on terrorism, which obviously always have been about money and power.
Give me 1 minute to summarize we were tricked into Iraq by the neocons who told us that Saddam had something to do with the World Trade Center, which was a lie, that he had planted the anthrax attacks that came 5 days after the World Trade Center, which was a lie. That turned out to be, the intelligence agencies and the U.S. military at Fort Detrick. That anthrax the FBI found came from Fort Detrick. So it was somebody in the U.S. government who sent it to.
That's what I knew he was going to say that. I was a young E4. This was 2004, right? I got sent to a school in Aberdeen, Maryland, between Fort Detrick, Aberdeen, and whatever. And it was a school on chemical, biological warfare treatments, right? And I'm like, okay, this is fucking cool. I don't know how I got selected to this school. I'm not a Fed, and I'm not one of those guys because I just know how to do it. But we're going through it, and we had to. There was one module where, like, hey, the effects on nerve agents and how to treat them, and seeing early and late signs. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can't wait to see this. We get to the thing. I'm like, oh, how they're gonna show us how it works. These motherfuckers have monkeys hooked up to IVs. And they're like, here's the effect of nerve agent. And they inject these monkeys. And you can see it slowly, like, freaking the fuck out and screaming. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck are we doing here? And then they're like, inject them with the antidote. And they're just, you see them slowly getting better and better. I'm like, how many fucking times a day do you assholes do these? I mean, this wasn't just like a monkey or two. This was 20, 25 monkeys. Each student got to see their own monkey. It was fucking retarded. But at the same time, it was good training. Kinda wish we could have done it on, prisoners who were in jail for life or death row. Kind of the way I feel about when I had to train before they, because a lot of people don't really get to see a real patient before they actually get over there to Iraq and Afghanistan. They're like, oh, fuck, there's so much blood. What they do is they train us with pigs and goats. Some of us. Some of us they didn't because they're just not special. But he literally had to treat a goat to where they would, or a pig, where they would shoot the pig, and you have to treat it and keep it alive for 72 hours. Anything can happen with those 72 hours. The weather, got to keep the pig warm. You got to keep the pig dry. You got to make sure the pig gets some kind of nutrition. Or then you go to the regular, regular medics, and what they do, they take a goat, they intubate the goat, they, put the goat to sleep to where it can't feel any pain. And then, you look and you're getting a brief, and then you hear, turn around. And you see this fucking goat is literally laying there on a table with a leg fucking chopped off. A fucking leg chopped off. So we had to get it, put a tourniquet and all that stuff. I'm like, all right, yeah, you guys did great. I'm like, what? Covered in blood. I'm like, oh, that was interesting. And then all right, turn around again. I'm like, dude, don't tell me they're going to cut off the other leg. That's kind of fucked up. Turn around. Fucker got, his chest is deflating because they put something in to puncture his lung. I'm like, oh, this is great. So we did a needle chest decompression, put a chest tube in the goat. Goat's good to go. Goat didn't feel it though. And then they did it with the other limb. What they would do, they cut the femoral artery, and they're like, ready, go. And you got to stop that blood. So you're packing it with combat gauze, and then you're trying to close it, so the blood stops. Good to go. And they're like, all right, what'd y'all learn? I'm like, a lot. And then they open up the chest cavity. You can see the heart as it's beating. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And they take this, it was blue. And they're like, all right, we're gonna put him to sleep. It'll be painless. They inject it, and you see the blue flowing through the tube, and then you see it slowly going into the heart. And the blood vessels in the heart started changing the colors, and you see the heart go boom, 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 boom. And then it got irregular and slower, and then it just stopped. And then I'm like, all right, what do we do to the goats? Thinking, hey, we're going to eat these goats, right? They burned them. Think about that. They go through probably 100, 150 goats a month doing that training. Maybe I'm overestimating because it's different now. But damn, I just went off on a tangent. My bad, guys.
Patrick Leahy and Tom Daschle, who were the two senators in the week after 9/11 who were trying to block the Patriot Act. And it shut down Congress, and the Patriot Act went through. And
worst thing to ever happen.
And then they told us.
Wait. Really?
Yeah. Yes. And the FBI, after a year of investigation, traced the anthrax. It was a kind of Ames anthrax that was weaponized. And the only source of that in the world could be the U.S. government.
Yep.
And they traced it to Fort Detrick.
So the biolab there.
Yes, the biolab at Fort Detrick, the CIA biolab at Fort Detrick. Oh, somebody sent that in at the time the Patriot Act was being debated. And the two leading guys who were blocking it was Patrick Leahy and Tom Daschle were the recipients of it. It shut down Congress. The Patriot Act goes through. And what does the Patriot Act do? Two things. I mean, it basically gets rid of a large part of the United States Constitution, Bill of Rights.
Yep.
And allows spying by
legalized
spying
spying
on the American people. And it reopens the bioweapons arms race because bioweapons were shut down in 1969 by, we saw, Nixon did this incredible thing of closing Fort Detrick, shutting them down and saying we're no longer making bioweapons, and then got everybody to sign a treaty in 73. Well,
it's still there.
To ban bioweapons. The Patriot Act has a provision in it that says we're not walking away from the Geneva Convention, which makes it's a hanging offense to develop bioweapons. We're not walking away from the Bioweapons Charter of 1972, 1973, but we are adopting a new rule that any federal official who violates those acts cannot be prosecuted. So it reopened, it effectively got rid of
a crime without a punishment.
Yeah, but anyway, anyway, I forgot where we.
So let me add. It's an interesting segue because Victoria Nuland kind of blithely announced during congressional testimony.
He's like me.
That, by the way, we have these biolabs in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that was like kind of ignored, and the people who covered it got attacked for covering it. But the fact remains there are U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. Why would we have biolabs in Ukraine?
Wow.
We have biolabs in Ukraine because we're developing bioweapons. And and those bioweapons are using all kinds of new synthetic biology and CRISPR technology and genetic engineering techniques that were not available to previous generations. They can make frightening stuff. What happened was, when we walked away from, when the Patriot Act reopened the bioweapons arms race in 2001, the Pentagon began putting a lot of money into bioweapons, but they were nervous at that time because if you violate the Geneva Convention, it's a hanging offense. And they weren't sure that provision in the Patriot Act would actually hold up as a loophole to treaties that had been ratified by Congress. So they were nervous about actually going full force into bioweapons development. So they transferred the authority for biosecurity to one agency in the HHS called the National Institute for Infectious and Allergic Diseases, run by Anthony Fauci. So Anthony Fauci got all the responsibility for bioweapons development. He got at that time a 68% raise from the Pentagon in order to do that work.
And I think he's going to go to it later. Anthony Fauci is the highest paid government official in the entire country over the president. And I believe his retirement is, which he's getting paid for the rest of his life because he's a government employee, is fucking definitely in the six figures. I'm retired and I make 5 figures. Does it make sense? I was in the government about as long as that motherfucker was.
That's why he was the highest paid official in the American government of 4 million people in the American. He gets more money. He got more money, $450,000 a year than the president. That any Supreme Court judge, any member of Congress, he was the highest paid, and it's because he got that 68% raise from the Pentagon to do bioweapons development. Now, when you do bioweapons development, every bioweapon needs a vaccine. So you develop them side by side, because in 100% of the cases when you deploy a bioweapon, there's blowback. Your side also gets sick.
Yep.
So in order to deploy one offensively, you need a vaccine to counter it. So you need vaccination.
We're not saying that word. But it's funny that the U.S. had priority and we developed it first. We led the way. We saved the world.
Your team before you deploy it. So those two things are developed through a field of science called gain of function science, where you take an infectious microbe and you amplify its infectivity, or you make it jump species, so it may kill monkeys. Now you make it kill humans, and you adopt it that way. And there's all kinds of methods, and then you make it immune to antibiotics and to therapeutic drugs and to other therapies. So it's actually the inverse of medicine. For 2,800 years since Hippocrates, doctors have been trying to figure out how to make microbes less infectious and less deadly, and developed antibiotics and therapeutics to do that. Well, the guys who are involved in this, there's 36,000 what are called life scientists, but they're actually death scientists, who are now employed full-time in developing, microbes that can be used to kill people.
But given the experience we just had 3 years ago, where a virus from a biolab overturned
So let me just finish this brief history about what happened. In 2014, 3 of those microbes escaped. Fauci built labs all over the country, in Galveston and Boston, everywhere. They're BSL-4 labs. We don't even know how many there are, BSL-3 and BSL-4. We have no idea how many there are. There's, we've counted them. I have a new book coming out that goes through the ones we know. But there are many secret ones that people don't know about. And they're doing it here in the United States. But in 2014, 3 bugs escaped from 3 different labs. And they were high-profile breaks, and they were very dangerous things, smallpox and a couple of other bad microbes.
What the fuck was I for?
The public learned about it, and there was a lot of publicity, and Congress held hearings. 300 scientists wrote President Obama and said, you've got to shut down Anthony Fauci, because he's going to create a microbe that will cause a global pandemic. And so Obama signed a moratorium that shut down the 18 worst of Anthony Fauci's experiments, where most of them were taking place in Galveston and in North Carolina by a scientist called Ralph Barrick down there.
Galveston, huh?
And instead of obeying that law, Anthony Fauci shifted a lot of his operations offshore. And those operations ended up, most of them in the Wuhan lab, which is a military lab, and that the Chinese run, the People's Liberation Army. And then a lot of them went to the Ukraine. So a lot of that science now, and it's funded, Fauci was funding lots of it. But then the other government agencies began to get confidence in, their ability to get away with it.
Just FYI, I'm playing this, and everything that I've been saying for a while, I may or may not agree with, because YouTube, but I've been saying pretty much similar things.
And most of
I know, Tommy boy, I'm trying to figure out how to not do this
the
time.
biggest single funder is USAID, which is, a CIA cutout.
Do you think the lab leak was a leak, or was it intentional?
Well,
come on,
Rob, shows that
don't indicate
that the people who were working on a particular coronavirus technology that was taught by Ralph Barrick, funded, it was developed by the U.S. government with NIH money. It was then taught to a group of scientists,
right?
Xi Zhengli, who's famous, that lady, and then her assistant, Ben Hu, and a couple of other scientists at the Wuhan lab. Barrick taught them 2 things. He taught them, one, how to engineer the spike with a furin cleave that could attach to the ACE2 receptors of the human lungs and make people sick and spread through the air.
No.
He taught them another trick that has nothing to do with public health, conceivably, which is a technique called seamless ligation, which is a technique for disguising the evidence of human tampering. So you can make the microbe and then you can erase the evidence that human beings actually made that microbe. And Ben Hu was leading that research. Ben Hu then got sick with two other of his fellow researchers, and they ended up in the hospital with COVID symptoms in November of 2019. So it appears that Ben Hu, the subway line that goes past the Wuhan lab and goes straight to the airport, all the original cases were along that subway line. And so the intelligence agencies that are actually being honest about that, and most of them are not, believe that Ben Hu and two other researchers got sick. The most likely scenario is that Ben Hu and two other researchers who were working on infectious coronavirus bioweapons got sick and they didn't know it. And so they were riding that subway line every day and infecting people before they actually got symptoms. And that's probably what happened, but nobody knows.
You've said a number of times publicly, many times publicly, and I think it's now been confirmed that CIA had knowledge of, at best, had knowledge of your uncle's assassination. It's still being hidden now. What do you think, and that's obviously true, what do you think the motive was?
You'll catch that?
Had knowledge of your uncle's assassination, knew things. It's still being hidden now. What do you think? And that's obviously true.
There it is.
What do you think the motive was?
It's obviously true
in that killing.
Well, I think the people who were involved in it, the specific people who were involved in it, were almost all associated with the Miami station, which was the largest CIA station at that time, and was basically it was the Cuban station. And the people who were involved in that station were people like Bill Harvey and David Atlee Phillips, who was clearly involved in my uncle's assassination. He was, by all evidence, he was Lee Harvey Oswald's handler at the CIA. And then E. Howard Hunt, who made a confession, David Morales, who is the chief hitman. He ran the Operation Phoenix program in Vietnam. He killed 10,000 people, civilians over there, murdered them. And he also gave a confession of being in Dallas. And then there were most of the people were associated with Cuba, and the impetus came from that group of people who were angry at my uncle for not sending in air cover during the Pigs invasion, and even more so after the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. My uncle then developed this friendship with Khrushchev, and he shut down all of the Cuban attacks by Alpha 66 and these other groups that were harassing Cuba. They were sinking ships, or sinking Russian ships. They were operating flotillas out of South Florida and doing raids on. And my uncle and father sent the Coast Guard down to confiscate their boats and their weaponry and to arrest the ones that continued to do it. And those people, those individuals, were also have been traced and tracked to the assassination, over the years. And they're now. There's been, there's millions of documents. I mean,
but why not release all the documents? What doesn't make sense to me is why not just
get them, Tucker?
Now? I mean,
you can get them, right?
No one you describe is still alive. There's no living
everybody now, virtually.
So why wouldn't Biden declassify these documents?
I don't know why.
You gotta make sure I don't run over a kid.
I agree. I know why Trump wouldn't, because he was convinced by Mike Pompeo not to. So, and it's not an excuse, but not,
but we don't know what Mike Pompeo said to him.
No, but that's the point. Like, what could possibly
the law requires them to do it. So the JFK assassinations law required that all documents be released by 2017.
Yeah,
and yet they refused. So they.
But it suggests that there's something
about
big.
4,000 of them. that are left. And you have to assume, and again, I try not to talk about things that I cannot document.
Oh,
Right.
fuck, I'm 3 minutes early.
But I think it's a fair assumption that they're not protecting individuals, that they're protecting some institutional interests.
What's the most powerful institution in American
Well,
life?
I'm not going to, I don't know. So I don't know.
You don't know.
I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
but it's there must be something, because like, why wouldn't they just release it?
And by the way, for people, you and I having this conversation about who did the assassination, why they did it, a lot of that is the stuff that I've told you, and I've tried to stick to things that, that are documentable, and the names, that, et cetera. But for people who want a real, kind of a panoramic view of what happened, I think the best book that's been written about this is Jim Douglas's book, which is called The Unspeakable, because he's done something that, after the Warren Commission, that became the orthodoxy. And the New York Times and all the major news organizations have enforced that orthodoxy. And anybody who challenged that orthodoxy becomes a conspiracy theorist. And in fact, in 1967, the CIA sent a letter out to a telecom out to all of its Operation Mockingbird people, which are all the assets it had in the American
Never heard
press,
that before listening to me, have you?
People, editors, senior writers in the American press, saying, from now on, anybody who questions the single gunman theory of the Kennedy assassination should be characterized as a conspiracy theorist. And they didn't coin the word conspiracy theory, but they popularized it with that memo. They sent a memo out to all their stations saying that talk should be discouraged. So but what happened after that is then in 1979, the House Assassinations Committee met for a year and a half, and they looked at much more evidence than the Warren Commission did, including, Alan Dulles. Alan Dulles had run the Warren Commission. He was the head of the CIA who my uncle fired. When my uncle died, he said, I'm glad the little shit is dead. He thought he was a god. That's what he said to a young reporter. And then he becomes head of the commission.
No shit.
It shouldn't have been called the Warren Commission. It should be called the Dulles, because Earl Warren had a full-time job at the Supreme Court. Hey,
any of you alphabet organizations, I feel like I'm becoming God. A God, not God, because I don't want to offend anybody, but a God. I could say the God, because, I look like the second coming.
The other guys on the Warren Commission had full-time jobs as senator and congressman. The only guy who went to every meeting and, looked at every piece of evidence and developed the questions for the witnesses was Alan Dulles. He was running the entire Warren Commission. And he should have been the prime suspect in the crime. And he was communicating secretly with the people at the CIA, with David Atlee Phillips, with George Johannides, who was the CIA liaison, telling them what questions were going to be asked and what they should reveal, and with J. Edgar Hoover at the same time. So the whole thing was a coordinated kind of kabuki theater. But then Congress goes back and investigates it in 1979. And Congress then comes back after a year and a half, seeing a lot more stuff, and says, and they conclude this was a conspiracy.
Yes.
So they make that official, so anybody who says it was just Lee Harvey Oswald is differing from the people who actually made the investigation.
So given
and
that,
most of the people on that staff who I've talked to believe that it was the CIA. And as you know, at that time, the dispute between them was it the mob and the CIA, because there was a lot of mob involvement. Johnny Roselli, Sam Giancana, who was the Chicago boss, Santos Traficante, who was the Tampa boss, and Carlos Marcello, who was the New Orleans boss, were all involved. And they all had casinos in Havana, and they were working with the CIA to assassinate Castro. So they had hitmen at their disposal, and they were training Cubans who were sharpshooters for Batista as hitmen. And I've talked to some of the hitmen. I've talked to Antonio Vecchiano, who was involved, and who was also David Atlee Phillips' handler. David Alley Phillips was his handler, and he was Lee Harvey Oswald's handler. So Veggiano met Oswald in Dallas.
How's this guy still alive?
September of 1963. Oh, I've talked to the people who were actually working for the CIA and the
Especially
mob
being
at
Kennedy.
that time, to kill Castro, and how they were then pivoted to this. Some of them were pivoted to this new project.
If you become president, what do you do about those 4 million federal employees, about the agencies which are running effectively as autonomous governments within our government? Like, how do you? When was the last president who controlled the agencies? And how would you do it?
I don't know. I feel like I'm probably, and I don't want to seem like I'm being vain, but I feel that because of the confluence of my experiences over the past 40 years, that I'm actually probably the only one that can unravel that agency capture. And let me tell you this, my daughter-in-law, who is co-running my campaign with Dennis Kucinich, Amaryllis Fox, was a CIA agent in the clandestine service for most of her career. And what she'll tell you, and she has a very sanguine view of the CIA, and the same as mine. And also understands all this evidence that the agency, was involved in the murder of my uncle and the cover-up, continues to be involved in the cover-up. But what Amaryllis will tell you is that of the 24,000 people who work for the agency, that 20,000 of them are patriotic Americans and good public servants, and that there's some people mainly in a plants division. The espionage division, the CIA, is made up of extraordinary people, principally who are doing an important job of protecting our country. The espionage division is the division that does information gathering and analysis, and the president needs that. The
Like Jack
plans
Bauer?
division is the action division. They're the ones that assassinate people, fix elections, overthrow governments, and do all the things.
It's funny. Nobody thinks we're over there overthrowing governments, installing governments, assassination attempts. We do this in other countries. Why not here? What if they are? And that's why they don't like people like RFK and Donald Trump. Well, I can see why they don't like Donald Trump. RFK? Surprised they haven't Kennedy'd him yet.
Things that I think we're paying for in our foreign policy today and in our domestic policy. My father was going to separate those divisions. My uncle ultimately was going to do that too. My uncle thought the CIA, he came out of his office during the Bay of Pigs and he said, I want to take the CIA, shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. He then asked my father to run the agency. He said, you're the only one I trust to do this. And my father said it, and my grandfather said, you can't do that. You can't. It would be like Molotov and Stalin. You can't have the brother of the president running
the CIA
agency with all this extraordinarily hidden power. So they brought in John McCone to run it, but John McCone, was not able to handle it. And my father, a week before he died, told one of his closest friends, Pete Hamill, who you may have known, that he was
Pete Hamill, the journalist?
Yeah, the journalist.
Yeah, of course.
He told Pete Hamill said, what are you going to do about the CIA? And my father said, I'm going to separate the plans division from espionage, and that's the only way to make it work. And that still makes a lot of sense today. Incidentally, I had dinner with Mike Pompeo, 3 weeks ago. And he said something really interesting to me.
Wait, you had dinner with Mike Pompeo?
Yeah, in Las Vegas.
Calm down, Tucker.
And he said something.
What was that?
It was the weirdest dinner I've ever been to.
Put your dick away.
I told you the other people were at that dinner.
Well, because I just can't imagine two. I know Mike Pompeo. I'm not attacking Mike Pompeo, but I can't imagine two people with more different views.
No, I've always, I have a kind of natal hostility toward Mike Pompeo, but I never knew him. But just because he was, for people who don't know, he was the CIA director and he was Secretary of State under Trump. And but he's an interesting guy.
He's smart.
Very smart. Harvard. I think he went to Harvard Law School.
He did.
Harvard undergrad, and then I think he had a military career.
Army officer. Yep.
And he, he's by all, on paper, he's kind of a great American. By all, his CV is extraordinary. And you never know, you make judgments about people before you meet them. And my judgment about him, I still don't know what to think of him. But what he said.
You wound up at dinner. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Bobby Kennedy and Mike Pompeo in Vegas at dinner. If I'd stumbled across that, I would have stopped.
It wasn't just
Tucker.
It was the rest
Dude,
of the
I'm
group
telling you,
thinks it's
Tucker's like,
weird.
you had dinner with Mike Pompeo. Oh, I wish I was there. I'd have been like, yes. Too much.
I'm not even gonna. I don't know if I'll even go there.
I think he's doing right now.
But he said to me before dinner, I had a moment with him, and he said to me, when I was at the CIA, I did not do what I should have done to fix that agency. And he said, and he was expressing regret, and he said. And then he turned to me and looked me dead in the eye, and he said, the entire upper echelon of that agency is made up of individuals who do not believe in the democratic institutions of the United States of America. That's a quote.
But so it was Mike Pompeo who convinced Trump not to release the file. And it was a guy who worked for Mike Pompeo texted me the day after I revealed that those files showed CIA complicity in your uncle's death, which they do, because I talked to someone who read them. And I said that on Fox News. And I got a text from a guy who works for Mike Pompeo informing me that I had just broken federal law and that anyone who had told me that was a felon because we had revealed classified information. And I said, wait a second, that classified information
for this journalism,
the government was involved in the murder.
Listen, once it's classified information and journalists get a hold of it, they're protected. Plain and simple. First Amendment.
Of an American president. Yeah, that's Mike Pompeo's position on that.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit weird for him to say, I think.
Well, there's 1 billion documents classified.
Yeah, I know.
Top secret. So, they can call it, they can stamp that stamp on anything they want.
Yep.
That's a lawyer's trick, to put.
And he was also behind convincing Trump not to pardon Assange.
Yeah, why didn't you do that?
That confirms my earlier assessment of Mike Pompeo.
That's interesting. You like him. No, it says a lot. Okay, so you have there's a documentary called Midnight at the Border about your visit to the border.
I have not seen it, so I'm not going to lie.
Border with Mexico, and I just want to play a clip from it for for people who haven't seen it.
We did 2 weeks to travel from Senegal to Nicaragua. After Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, and here. I'm going to New York to join my uncle. My dream is to dream American, to live in America, to work and to help my family.
We coordinate with the airport in Phoenix, and out they go to the final destination the same day.
Here, I hope to begin a new life. Yeah, my brother lives here. He's a citizen. Hey, good luck. Goodbye.
Most people bring the money or have a sponsor that buys their ticket.
What happens if family doesn't have the money to buy the plane ticket?
Well, FEMA reimburses us. We can buy that ticket and
so you buy the ticket for
yeah.
What did you learn from that?
Oh, what I saw was so extraordinary that it took me 3 days to even understand what I was looking at. Because the first night I go to Yuma, and I get to the wall at 2 a.m. and I watch the first group. There's a gap in the wall there, and I watch the first group come across, which was about 110 men from West Africa, mainly from Ghana. They're all, sort of military age men from Ghana. And by calling them military age men, I'm not making any implications about.
So what he's telling me is there's people that aren't from South America or Latin America coming through the border in pretty good numbers. It's weird.
What they're here for. I'm just saying, it's just a way
For
of
the dream
describing them.
American.
They were people, between 18 and 25. Got it. So I expected to see a lot of Central Americans coming up, and then and that was not what I saw. And then the next group was again about the same number. There were 2 busloads of people, and I interviewed every one of them. I talked to each one, and I want to say this: what we're seeing there. A lot of people come to this issue of, I think we need to close that wall. We need to close the border right now. And I'm going to explain to you why. But a lot of people come to this issue from sort of a nationalistic or even a racist or xenophobic.
I think it's more nationalistic.
I'm not coming from that place. I'm coming from
more for the people at the border. People at the border seem more proud to be American, so that. And then you got the bleeding heart liberals like, bring them here. And they're like, okay, here you go. And now they're like, fuck. Can we have some help? We don't want them anymore. We don't. Please stop. Fuck.
And a place of, just concern for our country. And this is a heartbreaking humanitarian crisis, and everything that happens to these migrants along the way is terrible.
Terrible.
Oh,
especially the young women
that came, and what's happening to our country is a catastrophe.
Yeah. And it's funny because that goes back to like the movement of these migrants from when they come in the port of entry. Sorry, I'm doing this because it looks like the border. So they come in the port of entry and they're hanging out here and they're hanging out here and the kids are hanging out here and like, oh yeah, I just want my kid, Mija, to go live with my uncle up here in Seattle. All right, it's like, all right, your Mija is going to Seattle. She's going to get on this plane. All right, cool. Mija's going to Seattle. All right, cool. Oh, this isn't the plane to Seattle. This is the plane to Miami. We're in Miami. Hey, senorita, come here. They're like, okay, I come in. And we just trafficked you. Yeah. I lost track.
And by the way, I was a person who ridiculed Trump's wall. Okay. So
really?
Now I've been down there and I've talked to everybody down there. And, I have a different position. I don't think you need to build a 2,200-mile physical barrier from, San Diego to Brownsville, Texas. But we definitely need physical barriers in the densely populated area. Definitely. Because we cannot survive with what's happening there now. The next group that came over were, again, about 110 people. There are 2 busloads. The cartels dropped them right on the other side of the wall in these buses, and there's 55 people per bus. The next group, there were people from Azerbaijan, from Kazakhstan, from Uzbekistan, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Tibet, Nepal.
What? No way.
From India, and the most came from China. There were only 2 families we met the entire night who were from Latin America, none from Central America, interesting. One from Colombia and one from Peru, and they were the only ones who had legitimate claims. They, of asylum claims. Everybody else we talked to said, "I'm here to have a better life." Well, that is not. If that's why you're coming to America.
There's a way to do it legally.
And you have to go through the front door.
You go to the embassy, yeah.
You go to the embassy. So they don't even have any legitimate claim to be in the United States. Nevertheless, the Border Patrol is so disillusioned and discouraged. 9 of the Border Patrolmen, we were told, had committed suicide in the last year because of what they're being forced to do. They are not protecting the border. What they do is they fingerprint. They can only hold the migrants for 72 hours. They fingerprint.
And they got to ship them out.
And they see if they have a criminal record. If they have a criminal record, they're put in a different process. But otherwise, they're then asked where they want to go.
Wait,
And if they don't have a plane ticket,
if they have a criminal record, they go through a different process. Does that mean they still get processed and released? That's an interesting question. I kind of wish he went into that.
they are brought to the airport. The DHS purchases them a ticket and sends them anywhere they want to go in the United
So
States.
the country's getting poorer every year. Our country's getting poorer every year. We're in a poor place right now. Who came up with, I mean, why do we owe plane tickets to people who come here illegally?
As far as I can tell, and there's a lot of evidence for this, and it's in our film, is that the Biden administration came in, in the same position I was, which is the wall is bad, but more importantly, any idea that Donald Trump had is a bad idea. So they just opened the border, and they've had this open border policy where they have not hired the judges. That's the most important thing that needs to be done. The judges need to be hired so that these cases, the asylum cases can be adjudicated right at the border, and people who are not entitled to asylum are sent back. But that's not what's happening. What happens is they're all given claims and they're told to appear in court, and they go to an arraignment fairly soon after arriving in Boston or New York or Miami or wherever, Minneapolis, wherever they're going. And then they're given a court date, which on average is 7 years out. So they're in.
I hope next time I get arrested, I get the same courtesy.
Yeah. Oh, they're in our country then for.
So what he's saying is, I could get a better life if I just fly to Mexico, and then I come up through the border. Oh fuck, they can't because my fingerprints are already in the system. Never mind, that plan's fucked.
7 years, and let me just tell you from their point of view what's happened. First of all, the cartels are now controlling our immigration policy in the United States. All of these people who came across knowing exactly what was going to happen to them because they had seen it on advertisements the cartels are sending around the world on TikTok and on YouTube. It tells you what you need to do to get in, what airports you fly into, what visas you get, how to get them, and how to get to the cartel parking lots where the buses will take you. Some of them fly into Nicaragua. Most of them fly directly to Mexico City and from anywhere in the world. These are not, Central American, Latin American. They're coming from everywhere.
So
basically, they fly to
get rid
Mexico
of my
City. The cartels assist them getting a
Anybody know how to do that without it hurting?
And then they are put on a domestic flight to Mexicali. And in Mexicali, there's a big parking lot with buses operated by the cartels. The cartels charge them between $10,000 and $15,000 a piece to get through, and then they drive them up to the wall and they unload them. We watch them unloading them on the other side. Large numbers of them get abused. They get extorted. They get exploited. They get robbed, raped, beaten.
Yep.
The Peruvian family that I met had every penny taken from them. He said, my whole life savings was taken from me. There's a tree that we could see from where we were when it was daylight.
Rape tree?
It's called the rape tree, where the cartels extract final payment from women who are crossing the border. If there are attractive women that they, in their view, and I don't mean physically attractive, but if attractive for whatever their purpose is, to sell or to traffic or whatever, or children. Those children are separated out. The Colombian family had lost a girl and a teenage girl. And, the father was desperate, and she had been separated from them by the cartels before they passed.
Oh my gosh.
And 85,000 children have disappeared in this process. It's monstrous.
So
but then let me tell you this. They get into our country, and there's a lot of people who are well-meaning, mainly liberal people who care, who see themselves as deeply caring people who say we should have sanctuary cities, and we should, these people should be treated with dignity. But what really happens to
thought he was
them in
mimic-
real
my
life
mimic
is
voice.
that they get here and then they, for 7 years, none of them are legal. So they are now subject to terrible exploitation by unscrupulous employers all over this country. They're getting paid $6 or $5 an hour.
Which is funny because I think it was the last video or the video before that. These Republicans up in Iowa were like, yeah, I love where these migrants come in as long as they're here legally. Motherfuckers, I bet you half of your fucking fleet of whatever they call them are illegals. Just saying.
Hour, because they have no leverage in their employer.
Of course.
And that dampens the wages for every other American.
That's exactly right. It steals the leverage from American workers, too.
And there's 16 million of them here now. And they're crushing this.
I wish
safety
they would
system,
have
social
a
safety
status
nets in
for the
cities like
census.
New York has 95,000 of them have landed in New York. New York is now thinking of turning Roosevelt Island into an open air refugee camp. And there's a proposal that was on Bloomberg of turning Central Park or parts of it into open air camps for migrants. So, and that, Eric Adams, who's the mayor, has been saying this has got to end. We have to close the border. And a lot of these mayors who were people who were saying we're sanctuary cities.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of these,
like
you said, a lot of these cities, mayors, and governors were all like, "Oh, bring them here, bring them here." And I can't remember somebody else watching. A lot of these governors, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, they're black, and their cities are pretty much run shitty. Los Angeles, Seattle. I don't think Seattle's mayor is black. I know San Francisco, I think she's Asian. But you got Eric Adams, you got the fucker from Chicago who just doesn't seem to fucking care. They're just kids being kids, and they have nothing better to do.
Aligning themselves with that are now seeing what it really means. And it does not mean treating people humanely. It is the worst possible thing we can do. Meanwhile, 7 million have come across in 3 years, 7 million illegally. In that same time, there's only been 3.1 million legal immigrants. So these are the people who waited in line. For every one of them, there are more than 2 illegal ones coming across and taking those places. And that, a lot of the...
Not gonna lie, going through the process similar, my family going through a similar process, it took time. Just like the song, it took time and a whole lot of money. I think I sang it in the right, but it took money too. Quite a bit of money. I'm not saying we were well off. We're not. Obviously, I had to go to the army. I'll stop.
Anyway, it's not something that's sustainable. It's something that needs to end right away. And the cartels which are making
a lot of money.
The Mexican drug cartels are literally running U.S. immigration policy this time, not the president of the United States.
And corrupting the Southwest United States. Last question: will you succeed in getting a debate with Biden? Do you think?
Oh, please. I hope so.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's not very democratic to not do the debate. I hope that he will debate me. And I can tell you this, and I also hope that he'll come out and campaign, because I'm seeing a vision of America in that, both Trump and Biden are boasting about the economic prosperity that they've brought to our country. It's unusual to have 2 former presidents running against each other. Both of them are proclaiming their economic record. But I'm seeing things in this country that I never believed that I would see in the United States. People living in a level of desperation that I don't know. I've talked about. I have a friend called Keith Amato, who is, and I represented commercial fishermen for almost all my career as an environmental lawyer, and he's one of my closest friends. And he worked hard his whole life fishing out of Wellfleet and P-Town and Chatham. And his son-in-law now owns a fishing business, but he has no pension and he's on full disability. He had a lot of injuries and a lot of damage during his life. So he was collecting food stamps, $283 he was getting a month, and it's critical to his survival. Even then, he was telling me, I have to switch recipes to be able to get through the checkout line. I have to buy cheaper recipes and get fillers, etc. And in the last 2 years, the price of food, because to fund these wars that we're funding, they print money, and that means inflation, and that's a tax on the poor. Oh, the price of food has gone up by 38%. The price of basic foodstuffs, chicken, eggs, and milk have gone up 78%. So his food stamps were 78%, less valuable. On March 1st of this year, he got a phone call from a government phone call, robocall. The recorded voice told him that he was getting his food stamps cut to $23 a month, so 90%.
Holy shit.
30 million Americans got that phone call. And, that's the same month we ratcheted up our contributions to the Ukraine at 113 billion. And
fuck you, Dan Crenshaw, for voting for that shit.
Billion unanticipated dollars to pay for the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank. There's lots of money and we began cutting 15 million people from the welfare rolls. Since then, 4 million have been cut. This is on Politico this morning from the Medicare rolls. So there's no money for poor Americans. And the people that I see are living because of the inflation and because of what's happening with this desperation. The average wage in this country is now $5,000 less than the cost of basic goods, of food, transportation, and housing. So half of Americans are making up that gap by putting it on their credit card bills. And this week, we passed $1.1 trillion in credit card debt. That's the first time in history. Most of that, or $330 billion of that, has been in the Biden and Trump administration. Two men who are saying, I'm helping America. There's $1 trillion in credit card debt, and those people are paying 22% interest. If the mafia did that, it would be called loan sharking.
Not dischargeable in bankruptcy, by the way.
Right, and it can't be discharged. I'm meeting people who are, couples who are sitting at their dining room tables and trying to figure out how this math works for them, because they can't. They're having to make choices. People in this country are choosing between food and gasoline and food and medicine. And they're listening to a little baby crying in the room next door, young couples, and have to wonder whether that baby is $50 sick or $100 sick or $500 or $1,500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. And, my wife and I were talking about the other night, and we were talking about this epidemic of depression and mental illness and anxiety that is afflicting Americans. The deterioration, the sense that the wheels are falling off. And she said, that's the way I felt when she was living in poverty. She said, that's the way I felt when the engine light came on my car, because I knew there was no money to pay it. And you have all these Americans now who are living hand to mouth, and they do not feel that anybody is listening to them in the political process. They feel they've been completely abandoned by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and that those parties.
You listen to some of these street interviews, you'll hear the same thing.
And
because you'll see a lot of. I don't see anybody that's really that was Democrat saying, "Oh, wait." A lot of the voters for the, let's say, lower class, working class, lower working class, and all these dudes, inner cities. I'm gonna say, predominantly black, because that's where they're doing the interviews. That say, yeah, I voted. I mean, they voted for Biden because, well, Biden's Biden. He wasn't Trump, and he was gonna forgive student loan debts. We all know that lie. But they were saying during Trump's administration, and they will all say this. Just about everybody says this. We were making more money. More money. Do I have to say it again? No? More money. They want us in debt. And that's why the the United States credit rating dropped to AA plus. Because we used to be the top dog. And then I can't remember if it was Obama or Trump that dropped down to AAA. And everybody's like, oh, fuck, the world's gonna end. It's goddamn another depression. We got better. And then Goldman Sachs' fucking CEO was like, I feel we should drop the credit rating for the United States to AA plus so we can raise interest rates. Further causing Americans to put shit on credit, increasing inflation, increasing prices, and easing control to these banks and these companies. The more inflation is, the better it is for them and our loving and caring leaders.
Aren't being heard, and particularly now, the Democratic Party has had this very interesting shift where when I grew up, when my uncle was president, my father was in, the Democratic Party was where the people who were poor and working people were. And today, 70% of the wealth in this country is owned by the Democratic Party and only 30% the Republican Party. The top 10 counties, the top richest counties in this country, 9 of the 10 are Democratic counties. So there is this kind of shift in wealth that maybe is one of the reasons that Democrats do not seem to be talking to or for working people anymore. But the people that I talk to, both through my job of representing them, I'm representing 1,000 families in Columbiana County, Ohio, Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Western West Virginia, whose lives were upended by the Norfolk Southern spill. Mm-hmm. And, they are just living in a level of desperation that I never thought I'd see in the United States. And, my father used to bring us to Southeast Washington. He'd load us in a station wagon and bring us to Southeast Washington to meet people who were poor, or he'd take us to the Mississippi Delta or West Virginia, to Appalachia or the Indian reservations, and he always said to us, "These are your people." He said the people who are wealthy and the people who have who are the big corporate leaders and titans, they don't need the Kennedys. They have lawyers and they have PR firms and they have lobbyists. And he said, "These are your people." And he came back from the Mississippi Delta one night, and he said, we were all eating. There were like 9 of our kids in the dining room at that time.
That's a lot of fucking
And he
kids.
said, I was in a tar paper shack today. There were 2 families there, and they eat 1 meal a day, and the kids go to bed hungry. Yeah. And he said, when you grow older, I want you to do something about those people. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That was a little different insight to RFK compared to what the media points him out to be today. Wow, it's all red. Didn't expect that. But it makes you think differently, because this guy has always been a Democrat, and he will tell you he's a Democrat. But when they say the lines have shifted, I believe the line has shifted. Everything's being pushed further and further left, so these conservatives suddenly are finding themselves, wait, it's shifting in 2 different ways. It's in my head. I had it explained out, and then I forgot, because my fucking thing keeps going focus, unfocus, and it's kind of fucking with my mind. See, just did it again. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I actually enjoyed that. I don't know if you did, but whoever stayed loyal for the whole 2 hours, fucking love y'all. Everyone else that showed up, I love you too. But that was 2 hours of listening to me talk, interrupting, and all that shit. But you stayed. Thank you. share, just add a like, leave a comment, fuck you, whatever. And I think I might come on later today because I did promise you guys Animal Farm. I feel like it's a good time because there's nothing on TV. And I don't really want to follow drama panels. So. Not telling y'all how to think, motherfuckers. I'm just telling you to think. And that's it. I'll see you later. What interview? Who am I talking to? Yeah. Yeah.